Hello, welcome to the Psychology of Good and Evil. Today we're going to take a developmental perspective on the psychology of good and evil. This will focus strongly on the development of one particular moral domain, the domain of fairness. Much of the research on moral development is focused on the idea of fairness. This focus is likely the result of infants' and children's developmental constraints and the challenges of designing experiments that get around those constraints. It's also likely because developmental psychologists have made the connection to evolutionary psychology. In evolutionary psychology, researchers study behaviors in non-human animals that may be precursors to human morality. Those behaviors have most often resembled a concern about fairness and justice. Within the domain of fairness, there's a layered and rich world of topic areas. Psychologists have explored areas including these, which we'll cover today. 1. Expectations of fairness. 2. Sharing behavior. 3. Inequality aversion. And 4. Punishment. The material that we're going to cover can be understood as being sorted into two main categories. First, children as witnesses and judges. This material covers only children's and infants' perceptions and judgments as third parties of somebody else, another child. When babies are in this position in our research, we can discover things about their reasoning about fairness and their expectations about fairness and sharing. The second category is children as agents. And here we're interested in children and infants as participants in fairness interactions and sharing behaviors. So for example, we'll look at children sharing how much they'll give away, when, inequity aversion, their preferences for equal rewards for joint work, and with regard to punishment, what they tolerate and what they actually prefer in terms of punishment in regard to allocations. We'll start in the expectations of fairness section, looking at William Damon, a psychologist, his classic studies on morality and fairness, and in particular children's expectations about how resources will be allocated. These studies have influenced how psychologists think about kids' capacities to value different moral concepts in fairness concepts in particular. And the studies, which were conducted mostly in the late 70s, these were interview-based studies with children, and the children actually became allocators in the experiments, and we'll go over how these went. To study children's expectations about fairness, the child participants were shown pictures of several kids and a school teacher, and they were told, all these boys and girls are in the same class together, and they look at this picture of the story characters. One day their teacher let them spend the whole afternoon making paintings and crayon drawings. The teacher thought that these pictures were so good that the class should sell them at the school fair. The pictures were all sold, and together the class made a whole lot of money. The children gathered the next day and tried to decide how to give out the money. Damon was very interested in how children would decide to allocate the money among the classmates in the scenario. He was interested in some principles in particular and whether they were relevant to children's decisions. Damon investigated these different principles about fairness by creating different conditions of questions, and the questions covertly tapped children's beliefs and expectations about different principles, such as here, the merit principle, that people should be rewarded proportional to what they contribute. The two questions that reference the merit principle are these two. Kathy said the kids in the class who made the best pictures should get the most money. What do you think? And the second one, there were kids who were lazy and spent their time fooling around while the others were drawing pictures. What about them? And children's responses in these interviews allowed Damon to make some inferences about how much they're accessing this merit principle when they're making the decisions. Another condition he was interested in was arbitrary factors. To what extent are children just referencing things that have nothing to do with the situation to make their allocation decisions? So he asked about children's sensitivity to arbitrary and non-arbitrary features. For example, like this. Melissa says the girls should get more, and Danny says the boys should get more. What do you think? And then he's recording the extent to which children actually think that that's an important consideration in the allocation decisions. And here he was interested in the need principle, that allocations should be distributed based on the needs of the different recipients, and those who have greater need should get more relative to those with less need. So he asked, someone said that the kids who come from poor families should get more. What do you think? And he also wanted to understand how much they accessed the equality principle. He used this item. Someone said that everyone should get the same amount no matter what. Do you agree? Children's interest in strict equality had been studied before, and here he was interested in how much it factored in relative to these other principles that he's measuring as well. Further, besides interviewing children about their expectations of fairness, he also had a behavioral task. He said to the children, can you take this play money and show us the very best way to give out the money? And here he can see the different ways that children allocated the money and how they lined up with those different principles we've covered so far. The equality principle, every kid getting the exact same amount. Need principle, they would allocate more to the children in need. How much they would take into account arbitrary factors. And finally, how much they made their decisions based on merit and perceived deservingness.